kid killed, and I got his fucking blood on me! Duh!
So for this episode, I'm going to be comparing both the novella and the movie The Mist. The novella was written by Stephen King in 1980, while the movie came out in 2007. The movie was directed by Frank Darabont of Walking Dead fame. He also directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, two of Stephen King's other works. A science fiction horror flick, it stars Thomas Jane as David Drayton, Laurie Holden as Amanda Dunfries, Marcia Gay Harden as token Bible thumper Miss Carmody, Andre Braugher as Brent Norton, and Toby Jones as Ollie. Many other characters are also in this movie, and you may see a theme between them if you've watched The Walking Dead. So as the story goes, one day there's this massive rainstorm in a town in Maine. It takes down some power lines and does some damage. The next day, David goes out to look at the damage and sees his ornery neighbor talking about the damage that has been done to his side of the fence and how they need to go and fix it. David decides to take his son Billy with him and go into town to get supplies. On their way, they pass some military convoys and vehicles, which is an unusual sight in Bridgeport, Maine. They get to the store in question, where they will get some supplies. During this time, David sees and speaks with some of the locals about the storm. Very suddenly and abruptly, a mist envelops the town, obscuring their vision to the outside. The road, the parking lot, everything is gone in this fog. A local resident comes flying in through the front door, screaming about creatures in the mist. As the townsfolk decide on what to do and how they should approach the situation, they decide that the first thing to do is going to be to fix the generator in the store. The bagger, Norm, who is clearly the only one equipped to restart a generator, goes into the back room with the other characters. The loading bay door is open and the mist is just outside while he's trying to restart this generator, when suddenly a thick tentacle reaches in through the loading bay door and attacks him. David and the others first stare in horror at what they are seeing, and then as they go to try and help Norm, well, Norm's going to have a bad day. Once our bagger hero disappears into the mist, leaving only a bloody trail, the others fall into a bit of a panic over what to do next. They shut the bay door and then they begin to barricade the front doors and windows of the store, which is essentially just panel glass all the way across. The rationale is, if the mist gets inside, then they're all dead. Good old Miss Carmody begins to preach of the wrath of God because of all their sins, and that is why the mist has shown up. Brent, on the other hand, being the headstrong curmudgeon that he is, decides to take a small group of people and leave through the front door. He doesn't believe that there's any real danger in the mist. He and that small group leave through the front door, and they are never seen again. Soon after, pterodactyl-like creatures and large flying bugs come flying in through the front window, killing some of the residents. Miss Carmody barely escapes with her life, as the other residents kill off the last remaining creatures. Miss Carmody, who almost just ate it in that scene, recomposes herself and actually grows her group in number after what has just taken place. I guess in their fear and desperation, especially seeing these Lovecraftian creatures outside, makes them turn to some sort of spiritual source, whether that's good or bad. Now David, whose group seems to be shrinking by the minute, both because they've either been killed or because the other groups are taking people away from them, decides that they're going to go to a nearby pharmacy to get some supplies for the wounded. Inside the store, they are attacked by some creatures.
Ollie, go over there! Ollie, there! Yeah! Shoot! Shoot!
Narrowly escaping death once again, they return to the store to see Miss Carmody is weaving her own web of cultish mayhem. She says sacrifices must be made to satiate the creatures and the mist itself. Her group hones in on a military officer who eventually admits that the mist was a government project gone wrong while they were trying to research paths to other worlds. He's subsequently tossed outside into the mist and takes a stroll through the parking lot. Just kidding. He's immediately devoured by a large creature. In the next scene, Miss Carmody wants Billy to be the next sacrifice, but there is a scuffle as David is not going to let them take Billy away. During this time, Ollie shoots Miss Carmody, allowing the group to narrowly escape. They get in a car and they drive off through the mist. During that time, they see horrific scenes of destruction all over. Also, on the way, they see a creature as it walks by, just showcasing how large and dangerous these things can be. That's when their car runs out of gas. Before I talk about both the endings of the novella and the movie, I wanted to talk a little bit about group hysteria. Now, in any situation, fight or flight kicks in and people deal with their situation in myriad ways. While this is a sci-fi horror movie, it does showcase the human condition and people at their best and worst. Brent, for example, showcases and emphasizes his thick-headedness when he decides he's going to leave with this group because he just doesn't want to believe what's happening. Sometimes people in their desire for control will try to look the other way on things in order to maintain their balance in their own mind. Despite the fact that something is very clearly wrong, he puts on blinders and walks out straight into the danger. Then you have Miss Carmody, like I said, the aforementioned Bible thumper. The religious zealot figure is an important one in things like this because not so much in what she's saying, but the fact that she's able to prey on people's fears and have them turn to her when there is no logical explanation is what makes her character so powerful. Group hysteria is well documented in many studies. For example, there is a study about people who were told that they were guards or prisoners, and soon into this experiment, the guards were treating the prisoners terribly, and the prisoners were acting like prisoners, even though the people in either of those groups were never guards and never prisoners. They fell into these roles that they were told they would be. Simply by giving one group power and the other one less, people fall into these roles they otherwise would not have done had they not been given these parameters to work within. It's often why cults participate in murders when none of the people involved had ever had a prior history of violence. If you give people power and fear, then they'll use those tools to survive. That's why the soldier was killed so quickly and easily in order to satiate the creatures. The people are just hoping for a way to end this situation, and if that means killing one to save many, in their eyes it was worth it. And finally, you have David's group. They're sort of the control group, I'll call them, in this story. They continue to think and act rationally, while the rest of the groups are becoming more hysterical. It was an interesting display of group dynamics and a microcosm of what happens on larger scales when people are subjected to a horrible event. Finally, as far as the mist is concerned, the creatures aren't wholly unique, despite their color throughout the movie. However, the mist is the real vehicle by which these creatures appear and arrive. If these same creatures were just walking by, they probably would be a little grotesque, but otherwise not scary in the same way as being unable to see what they are until it's too late. So overall, I think that the mist was a very unique way to deliver the creatures to the characters, as opposed to, say, just darkness. Usually darkness is the main vehicle by which horror creatures arrive. Now for the endings. Spoiler alert, if you don't want to know what happens at the end of the novella or the movie, I want you to move forward right now to the writing focus. You've been warned. So as I said earlier, at the end of the movie, the car runs out of gas, and now the group is surrounded by mist, and with nowhere else to go, David has to make the really heart-wrenching and terrible decision to do a group suicide. They think it's the only way to avoid being ripped apart by these horrible creatures. One by one, the event takes place in the car. David, however, has now run out of ammunition, so he can't even kill himself the way he's had to kill his son and the others in the car. In a rage and facing certain death, and having to face what he has just done, he opens the door and he steps outside, just waiting for the creatures to kill him. However, at that moment, the military shows up and is repelling the mist successfully while killing all of the creatures. If David had just waited a couple of minutes longer, all of them would be alive at that moment. It was honestly a refreshing and heart-wrenching way to end a movie, considering that he technically survived, which is the ultimate goal of characters in horror movies, but he had to do such terrible things at the end, including killing his own son. In the novella, actually, you learn that the narrator has been writing out a long letter this entire time, and he is going to leave it in this dark diner before they try to travel away from the mist and see if anyone is still alive. So in other words, this novella was this letter all along that you've been reading, and now the hope by the survivors is that someone would be able to pick up this letter and read it to know what had actually happened. So you become the person who has been reading the letter this whole time. You never find out what actually happens to those characters when they leave the diner. Again, this was also a great ending, albeit a little bit less dramatic and more subtle than the movie, but I thought that both did a great job at telling a story that was really memorable either way. So for today, I want to focus on the value of audiobooks as a self-published author. Audiobooks are a great way to connect with readers. So many people are on the go and there's always something happening where now people can listen to novels instead of having to sit down and read them like they used to. There are essentially 3 ways to make an audiobook. Do it yourself in a home studio, go to a professional studio and have them equalize things for you, or hire someone to do the whole audiobook for you. Now, the first option is going to be the cheapest, albeit having to have the space in order to make a soundproof room. The mic also needs to be top quality, and you're going to need some good software to equalize your audiobook. Honestly, you also need a voice people want to listen to for 10 or 12 hours. The second option, a little bit pricier by my research, is to go to a professional studio and have a producer helping you equalize the audiobook as you narrate. Obviously, this takes not only money, but scheduling and time in order to achieve it. And once again, you need a voice that people want to listen to for the entirety of your novel. Finally, there is the option of hiring a professional voice actor to narrate and produce your audiobook. This is the option that I chose because I don't have a home studio. It's a lot to go out and schedule time to narrate my audiobook. And frankly, I think that someone else would read my audiobook better than I would. However, this is also the most expensive option because everything is out of your hands. The software, the equipment, and the voicing. Now, my narrator, Caleb, has done a fantastic job of narrating both of my audiobooks. He brings the characters to life in a way I don't think many people can. Now, my second novel, Codelines and Bloodlines, is out now in audiobook, ebook, and paperback format. Pick up a copy as soon as possible. And now today, without further ado, this is a chapter from my audiobook, Codelines and Bloodlines. Let me know what you think in the comments. Enjoy.
Legs jerked
One of the
violently.
cruisers.
Then
Eugene
Eugene
said,
still, looking in the rear view.
It's gaining. Can you lose it?
They accelerated through dilapidated roads, storefronts whipping by. Eugene turned a hard right at the last second, and the armadillo skidded across the asphalt, then kicked up a plume of dust where the streets met the wastes. The hand-painted cruiser, long and sleek with 2 open tiers full of troops, deftly rounded the corner and accelerated. Its engine was virtually silent.
That didn't work.
Red commented, strapping on his armor. Eugene weaved the armadillo between dunes, around a stripped mechan suit, and over another hill. Each time they avoided an obstacle or made a move, the Voladent behind them not only matched their maneuvers, but closed in. The soldiers wore deep red body armor, with a symbol emblazoned on their chests. 2 capital A's turned on their sides with the bottoms of their legs touching. Smaller symbols, illegible from the exhumer's point of view, adorned their lapels. Then a voice spoke over their loudspeaker.
This is Commander Lyle Staton. You are hereby under detainment by order of Mrs. White of the Annexers Alliance. Stop at once, and the penalty will be less severe.
Craig counted 20 soldiers on it, plus the commander and driver in a cockpit below deck.
Make them think about it.
Craig told Eugene, who began to decelerate. Red pulled his gloves on, looking at Craig.
Mind if I open the negotiations?
Craig nodded. Red sat in the chair and pulled the lever, zooming up to the cannon. Moira grabbed an energy carbine off the rack. Craig picked up Red's tri-barrel sniper cannon, last used against the errant vehicles in the wastes.
Take care of that,
Red yelled down, peeking between his legs.
and it kicks like a horse.
Craig nodded, snapping the cannon stand open.
You ready?
He asked Moira. Moira shrugged uncertainly. He kissed her, and she smirked. Strange timing, she commented. I thought you could use a confidence boost.
Now, let's give them our answer,
Craig said. He kicked the door open and fired. He almost fell backwards as the cannon recoiled almost a foot. With a thunderous boom, the round penetrated a line of men, exiting out the last and blowing the top off a dune 100 feet away. The remains splattered on the deck. Moira fired into the driver's cabin. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. Red pulled the receiver back and fired, obliterating troops on the second tier. At this point, the rest had taken cover. A few ducked behind rotatable shields and returned fire. Craig pulled the door closed as they fired, then shot again, blowing one of the support beams in half. The cruiser sidled up to the armadillo and something thudded on the roof. Red yelled out and drew his handgun. The chair suddenly dropped with him and 2 soldiers on it. He elbowed one in the head, shot the second, then stood and threw the first out the back door. "Watch it!" Craig yelled, as 2 more dropped down. The men carried blades and batons. One swung at Craig, who blocked it with the cannon. They traded swings in the tight space, while Red struggled with the other man. Craig used the cannon's butt to knock his adversary away, then hit him across the head. The Alliance soldier fell backward and vanished into the sands behind them. Red used his opponent's own hand to thrust the blade through his midsection. The man slumped over. The cruiser, now empty, veered off. "They're running!" Moira yelled. "No, no, no," Red said to himself as he got back in his chair. "They don't call the shots." "Get up next to them," Craig instructed Eugene. Eugene rounded a dune and came up beside the Alliance. The driver and commander's faces went white. Red aimed the cannon and fired into the driver's side. The engines beneath the cabin exploded, and the Voladent dove head first, flipping once and coming to a stop upside down behind them. "Go back!" Craig barked. "Let's make sure they're dead." As the armadillo closed in, a shaky voice rose from the cockpit. "Mayday! Mayday! We're down! Out in the waste somewhere! Activating homing beacon now!" Craig jumped out the back doors and walked up to the passenger side. Commander Stanton was still strapped in upside down. He held his comm in one bloody hand. He drew his handgun and pointed it in the commander's face. "Turn it off!" The commander ignored him. "Mrs. White, do you read me? I have activated the beacon. The insurgents are beside me. Need reinforcements." Red wrenched open the partly crushed door. Then he cut the strap holding the commander in his seat and dragged him from the wreckage. He stood Stanton up as the commander continued his pleas into his comm. Without breaking eye contact, Craig reached up and removed the device from Stanton's hand. "No one's coming for you. You're all alone." Moira came up alongside Craig and held up a little device. "It's off." Stanton stood as straight as he could muster the energy for, holding his side where blood trickled from a wound. He was about 6 feet tall, with thin, straw-like hair and a pronounced chin. His tattered cape barely clung to his shoulder clasps. "You're not the field general type," Eugene remarked, leaning on his rifle. "You don't have enough armor to stop a knife, let alone a bullet. Where's your helm? The soldiers wore helms." Stanton breathed in deeply. "I am Commander Lyle Stanton, of the Annexers Alliance. You were trespassing on our land. You were to be remanded in our detention center until we discerned what your purpose was, and you shot my helm off when you tried to kill me." "Well, Lyle, we're not being remanded," Craig stated. "We're not going to the detention center, and no one owns this land." He slowly circled Stanton. "Now, who's Mrs. White?" The commander fidgeted but tried to reinforce his authority. "She's in charge of the Annexers Alliance. You may know her as the Harbinger. We have imperial rule over this country, given to us by our ruler. We control everything and everyone within it." "Drexel hasn't had a president in over 60 years. Who gave you this authority?" Moira asked. We only know of him as Rex Ragum. He only speaks with Mrs. White. He has given us the power to rule." "Sounds like some bullshit to me," Red retorted. "No one is a ruler around here." Stanton smirked at Red. "Oh, but he is. He is the uniter of the clans that could not be united. He created the Alliance. Without him, we would be fighting over scraps for eternity. He has given us a directed purpose, a linear goal." "This goal involves murdering innocent people?" Craig asked, stopping in front of him again. "Women, children, the elderly. How could you do such a thing? Are you inhuman?" Stanton retained his wry smile. "They were given chances. A few, in fact. It was all laid out for them. They chose the hard way, and they were weak." "Why are you telling us all this?" Eugene asked. "Why give this information willingly?" "Yeah, we haven't even hit you yet," Red added. "You are kinda killing the fun." Stanton turned to Eugene and shrugged casually. You won't be alive long enough for it to matter. Eugene then said, You blew up our home. She blew it up, your leader. She destroyed everything and everyone. Poetic, I think, to be the destroyer of your own society. Also infinitely stupid. They got what they deserved, and you will too. At the word stupid, Craig's blood boiled. His vision became a pinpoint. Everything else had gone red. He tackled Stanton to the ground and slammed his head into the hard earth. He punched the commander's face over and over again until his knuckles bled. Craig! Moira cried. Craig, stop! He grabbed a rock the size of a melon and brought it down on Stanton's head with both hands. The commander's legs jerked violently. Then he went still.